Hello, I am Dujek.
So, you want to go ahead and start out this interview by introducing yourself, tell us how you got into Eve, and what got you basically playing.
I had always known about Eve. Um, I started hearing about it because I lived in Iceland at the time that it was being made and it was being released. It came out while I lived there. And I honestly I didn't have good enough internet. I was like a pure RTS player at that point. I couldn't get it to run. So I didn't play it. I many years later saw my friend was playing it, and he was playing in the Alliance tournament. And he invited me over to his house, and I got to see how incredibly overpowered drakes are. I was like, drakes are really cool. I should start playing Eve. I didn't start playing Eve. I finished my university degree. Several years passed. I saw that people were talking about the Battle of Asakai, and it was huge, and all gaming news, and people were talking about it all over the place. I didn't start playing Eve, but 1 year, Brave Newbies was founded kind of after this, and 1 year or so after Brave Newbies was founded, there was another huge battle, and I thought, wow, there was a huge battle last year. There's a huge battle now. I guess I should start. I went on Reddit, I found Brave Newbies, and I've played since.
So, you went into Eve directly into Brave Newbies. Was that a high sec campus or was that right out into Null?
We lived in Losec at the time. We lived in Barliget when we moved to Barliget shortly after I joined, and every day we would undock and we'd roam around in Losec, and we'd get farmed on the undock by a character named -93. He still is one of the most deadly characters ever to play the game. He quit 8 years ago, still sitting on like 35,000 kills. He just farmed us relentlessly every day. He'd undock in interceptors and archons and Proteus, and he just like killed the entire undock. Nobody could do anything about him because he was just wrapped by the archon the whole time, and then he'd dock up again. I learned a lot about undock mechanics and stuff like that back in those days, and it's been useful. It was a harsh start to any game, but it also made it like very fun and addicting.
So, you are part of the CSM19 candidacy this year, and I am sure that you're coming to us with a couple campaign points. Can you give us 3 things that you are campaigning for this year?
For the question of what my 3 words were for CCP, I did inclusivity, explosions, and objectives. And my 3 biggest campaign points, like at first, is always inclusivity, and that goes in 2 ways, both in terms of getting new players to play the game and make sure that this game always keeps the community that welcomes new players. We shoot them, we blow them up, and then we shower them in ISK. That's how I learned it when I was new, how I still do it. I did that the other day. Killed a Nubro scanning in a Vexer. He was very bad. I gave him lots of ISK. He told me to. Well, I won't repeat that here, but it was still like the quintessential new player introduction. And the other part of inclusivity relates to some of the questions that I see that I'm getting later, so we'll talk about them more then.
Okay.
For explosions, I want ships to be cheaper. I think that currently the economy favors not doing as much as we used to do. We're kind of sick of having a lot of austerity in the game, and certain areas could be improved upon to make us fight more with cheaper stuff, including cheaper capitals. The battleships Tech 1 have gone down a little bit. I like that. And for objectives, it particularly pertains to Equinox as it was released, and then iterated on in an absolutely disastrous way, where they gave us lots to do and gave other people chances to steal our stuff, and then they kept us doing a lot of stuff, but nobody can steal our things anymore. So we're doing work that we don't want to do as space workers in Null, and people don't get to fight us over it, which is not what they want either. So like nobody came out of that better.
Alrighty. So now we're going to get into some of my favorite questions that have to do with new bros. What do you think are the biggest challenges facing new players coming into EVE today?
I think one of the biggest issues, and one that I brought up last year as well, is that people join the game if they have MMO experience or if they don't have MMO experience. They kind of get the new player experience, which is just a bunch of quests. You log on, they tell you to mine, you get a ship. You mine some more, you get a ship. You kill some rats, you get a new ship. You blow up your ship, you get a new ship. Every mission ends with some sort of like getting a little bit more stuff, explaining about skills and so on. And once you've done all 46 missions, it stops. The game no longer has any direction for you. It kind of suggests what could happen to you, but not how you should go about that. And then new players like boat into low sec or into wormholes to mine or whatever, and they get blown up, and then they get showered in ISK by experienced players, and then they get mad. You can't easily find a corp that accurately reflects what it does. If you, as a new player, go in looking for a corp and look at that kind of bad UI, every single corp suggests that they speak all languages, they are active in all time zones, they're active in all space, and they do all content. Like, if you like mining, all the corps say that they do mining, but they don't all do mining. There are a lot of corps that want to just recruit anyone with a pulse for taxes or for whatever purposes they need manpower, but they don't tell the new players what they're actually signing up for when they join.
Right. So then,
I think.
go ahead.
Oh, go on.
No, go ahead.
I think that UI needs to be based on what the corps have of like actual statistics. Like if a corp dies a lot and kills a lot, they get to say we PvP, and if they mine a lot, they get to say they mine. But if nobody has mined in a month, like should you be able to say that you mine? I'm not so sure. Like the game has metrics for the activity of a member base in any corp. I think that it would be cool to tie that in so that when people are advertising, it's somewhat truthful.
I can totally agree with that. It's a kind of bugbear of mine as well. And of course, this type of thing probably is going to make people join a corp and it's not what it is, and maybe even leave the game. Besides improving the corp finder, do you have any other advice that you'd like to give CCP to improve new player retention?
I think that there's a whole extra step where they should have a intermediate player experience where you've got a series of go and do these things in nullsec, or go and do these things in lowsec, or like actually, instead of having the air activities say capture an undefended faction warfare complex, and that gives you 500,000 ISK and 1,500 Eve marks, which Eve marks aren't explained in the new player experience at all. Why do you want them? But that it holds your hand a little bit. I'm not suggesting turning this into like everywhere is high sec, everything is easy, there's no skill to the game. but certainly there could be a little bit of pointers of you ought to fit a frigate. Your frigate should have guns. Your frigate should also have a prop mod and tank, go to a faction warfare complex, and it could even give you a completed state if they kill you or if you succeed. Some of those things for all the other areas of space that are accessible to new people.
Okay. Then the loaded question for some of the candidates have been, when's the last time you actually ran through the NPE?
I have a great answer to this question actually, because I recently did a nearly full year of making a completely new character from scratch, detached from all my other accounts, detached, like not given any ISK. I grinded everything myself in order to spy, basically. I just did the whole spy experience. I decided I'd join the very first corp to contact me by mail. I joined them. I did their new player experience, which I have opinions of, but certainly they were spending a decent amount of time onboarding their characters. Um, they had teaching classes, they had activity metrics, they told people exactly what they expected people to train by what time. So you get like 15 days worth of skill queue that is like, this you have to do by the first month. So you can do a bit yourself. You have to listen to them a bit. They would give you free ships, but not a lot of free ships. And then as you progressed within the ranks of the corp, you would have to acquire other free ships and stuff. And then after I stayed with them for a while, I spied on Horde for a bit because, I mean, I'm at war with Horde, so it was fun. I also enjoyed hanging out with them. And yeah, I did one full year of new player stuff for that project.
Okay, that is awesome. I'm going to admit that I have been sitting there thinking about, joining different corps that do the corporation spam, but time is kind of relative in Eve, and I don't have a lot of it. So kudos to you for actually doing that. That's it's pretty cool.
Yeah, I've done it with a few corps in the last 10 years. I've seen a lot of the new player experiences that exist in the game, and it helps me because I interact with a lot of new players myself, and I've taken a lot of good ideas from elsewhere.
Excellent. So I know that community is important to Brave. Community is important to Eve. So, what is your definition of community within the context of this game we love?
I I'm not entirely sure how to define that. I guess um, we're all gathered around primarily some sort of social media that holds the corp together. In my community, like for Brave, it's Slack. We have about 1,000 to 3,000 people active at any time. People don't leave the community when they quit the game or when they take long breaks. And they keep in touch. They might come back to the game, they might leave, but the community is basically anyone you've played Eve with for as long as you keep in touch with them. I still have friends that I made in Eve 10 years ago who haven't played Eve since, but they're still kind of in that community.
I like that. So, do you think that communities like Eve Rookies, Spectre Fleet, the other MPSI, I think Abyssal Divers, do you think that all of these are actually community? Or does it have to be in game to be community?
No, I don't think it has to be in game. Like, those are, like, I would say that the majority of people who are still in my community in Eve are not in game. Like I know more people I have played Eve with than I do play Eve with, but I'm always pleasantly surprised when they show up after 8 years. Actually, one of the people who was in my corp 10 years ago started again like 18 months ago or so playing again, and we hang out like 3-4 days a week for a couple of hours, chatting, and it doesn't necessarily have to be Eve that we're playing all the time either.
I like that. Now, this next question, it's kind of become a little passion project of mine, about toxicity. And for those of you watching, this isn't about PvP. This isn't about going and melting the face off somebody in nullsec or killing a new bro or even ganking. That's all part of Eve. You know, it's a rough, tough, tumble game. What I'm talking about is, you know, the casual racism, the homophobia, people thinking that they're being funny by calling people, you know, names that they just shouldn't be. It shouldn't be in vocabulary in 2024. Do you think toxicity is still a big problem in Eve today?
Oh, it's a huge problem. I think that we spend a lot of time dealing with it where I currently play, but also because our standards are higher. Like, it could occupy zero time for somebody who has no standards. Not saying that like very derogatorily towards them, but I think it runs the entire range of, oh, everyone in Frat is a bot, which like just blanket stating that all Chinese players are not playing the game and they're robots is like definitely qualifies as racism. And for other examples, like we recently got showcased on Reddit when one of our members died in a Naglfar and threw up a homophobic slur against the people who killed them, and we don't tolerate that. But at the same time, we don't blanket kick anyone the very first time they say something that is seen as acceptable or normal in the majority of gamer communities.
Right.
Like, a lot of people have played an Xbox game or lost in League of Legends or get ganked in Eve and just thrown out something because they do mean to hurt when they say it. Like, that's the point of swearing and of raging. But we do have a standard, and the corp I used to be in had a very high bar for like what we considered classy back in the day, and we found that the community of people that we had and the people who wanted to join us were often people who had been in a different group and felt that they didn't feel as welcome there as whatever like more typical gamer profiles felt.
Right.
Like, if you're a woman or if you're black or if you're not straight or if you're queer or whatever.
Okay, so yeah, Eve rookies, we pretty much have the exact same thing. If someone comes in and is completely toxic, you know, this is like next level. They usually get a one-way yeet right off the server. If it's something casual, like say that, like you said, being in other gamer communities, generally they're given a warning, shown our core values, and said, you know, don't cross it again. We'll be cool.
As for the reason why we can't just kick them, like, they wouldn't learn. Like, we have a lot of reformed casual slur users, I should say. Like, a lot of people come in from the wider internet culture and are shown like, these things are not appreciated, this isn't what we want people to behave like here, and like they'll take it with them elsewhere.
Right.
Like, just make our corner of space a little bit more tolerant, but it radiates out somewhat.
So then, of course, you guys don't tolerate it in Brave, but when you encounter it, say in local chat or on a server that you're on, what do you personally do?
I think that I don't hold them to as high of a standard. Like, I don't anymore try to like have like somebody who's like, oh, that's fucking gay, and I'm like, okay, I'm going to write the mods now and get them banned, because the mods are going to ban me, or they're just going to tell me to to leave and not come back. Or like, it depends. If I saw it on the Eve Rookies server, like, action might be taken. If I see it in my own corp, I can hold them to a standard. If I see it in my own alliance, I have the power to do something about it. Like, I don't spend as much time as I probably should trying to like clean up elsewhere.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that if I saw somebody like curse out somebody and who's Chinese and Eve, that if I report them, something will be done with it. No, I think that like I've tried that many other years, and eventually I'm running for the CSM instead to like get something done.
It's probably a pretty good way to get something going with that. Now,
I've spoken to CCP about it at last FanFest and stuff. I brought it up with within a context of the localization projects they have and like language filters and stuff. Like there's a decent amount of xenophobia going around based on if people are Russian or non-English speaking, basically.
yeah. Okay, so now we're going to get into what has quickly become my favorite section of the interview. It's the let's pretend that you made it onto the CSM19. I have my little crystal ball. So you made it, and you're in your very first meeting, and CCP reveals the plans for the next expansion, and maybe even next year or the year and a half. But nothing that you've campaigned for, nothing that you are an expert at or very knowledgeable about, made it into their plans. What do you plan on doing?
I mean, probably run again. I think that, and I have this huge disclaimer on my CSM post that I'm not trying to become a game dev. Like, I find that incredibly interesting. Like, I read stuff the game devs write, but like CSM isn't a game dev position. If nothing comes in that was my project, that is probably the most likely way of seeing it. Or I get like the corp recruitment window just minorly changed, or like 3 ships balanced or something. But I'm not there to necessarily bring only my own issues and insulate myself and say, well, if nobody wants to talk to me about ansiplexes, I'm going home.
Right.
I think that I have tried to broadly state my stances on various common issues, more popular ones that I get asked about a lot, or a lot of other CSM candidates talk about, so that people know which way I would lean if CCP says, we want to do this thing. Do people hate this or do people love this?
Okay. So then, when you play Eve long enough, excuse me, as you have, gameplay is going to be changed. It's inevitable. I mean, I've only been playing for almost 5 years, and some of my gameplay has already been changed. And sometimes they even toss it out the window. What do you think you'll do when you find out that an integral part of your community's gameplay is set to be changed or even completely axed? I mean, this is stuff that your Brave community is so passionate about, and they go out and do every day, and they'll be mad.
I think that it really just has to boil down to better for the game. And especially as a nullsec candidate, and I see this for a whole bunch of the CSM candidates, whether they are from nullsec or if they have some sort of role that is more based on the metagame. I'm thinking of like Mike Azaria or the Oz, or other people who are accused of logging on too little, where as a nullsec candidate, you are always accused of and assumed to only go in there with an agenda that you got from your CEO. Like, Jinx gave me 10 things that he wants fixed to make Brave richer in the game. And that's just not how it works. I've not been given any notes on what I'm supposed to think about certain things in this election. And a lot of Brave's current situation and our current gameplay is more informed by the game mechanics and how we have to play the game than what we would already like to do. We tried to be an independent alliance up north with very few blues. We weren't aligned with Goons. We weren't aligned with Init. We weren't aligned with Dracaris. And eventually we couldn't cut it. We got evicted from our space by force, and we ran over to join somebody bigger. Like, that's the plane of it. And for the CSM to go in and like try to change that, yes, we think it would be better if smaller groups could exist in the game and there weren't just two huge null coalitions when we're looking at null. I also have spent a lot of time in Pochven, and Pochven recently got changed quite a bit, and the game change was, on the face of it, good. They took away the ubiquitous Ishtar fleets that we saw all over Pochven, printing ISK all the time. And the Ishtars were a problem. But we've ended up in a situation where everyone only flies Marauders, and Marauders are better than Ishtars, and everyone prints more ISK. So you've had a change that was good for the game that ended up being also bad for the game. Mm-hmm. And now we need to go in and we need to iterate on that again. And that would be the role of like the next group of CSM members. Because we already did something once, or they already did something once, and it didn't have entirely the best or the most intended consequences, and there's always going to be more iteration.
Yep, I agree. So then you're a nullsec candidate. What would happen if somebody who, say, doesn't have CSM representation or just feels that you're the most approachable of all the CSM that are in the council, but they're, like, say, they're not part of your gameplay? What if they come and ask you for help or ask you to ask CCP for something? Are you willing to communicate with them and help them?
I have a very big spreadsheet of just this. I've talked to a lot of people. This isn't the first year I run. I've talked to people before. I always had an interest in running, even when I was quite new and living in wormhole space. I was interested in it then. And so, like, this is a long running thing. And basically, a lot of the things that I'm being asked for are small, doable things, and they're super cool, and I would bring it further. And a lot of the things are mining titans and HiSec and other stuff that I don't know what to do with. And it is unlikely that I am the best in that case. I would hear any idea. I'd discuss any idea at length. I do have enough time to do that. But at the end of the day, there's a certain amount of judgment that goes into it if I were to be on the CSM, where I'd have to bring forward the best ideas and keep the rest for later. Like, we're not giving up on mining titans. They just aren't the most important things now. I would love for the game to be in a state where mining titans is the next thing that we need to make the game better.
So if you are elected for CSM19, would you put a plate of cookies into the game?
A plate of cookies?
Mm-hmm.
I think that would be fine. Like, Brave, during COVID, we found out that we were all at home and we needed something to do, and we started to bake bread, and we started to ping anytime somebody made bread. We still do, actually. If you bake bread in Brave, and bread is a wide definition: cake, cookies, flatbread, pizza, like anything that is like flour, water, yeast, salt is good enough.
I love
So
that.
we ping this out, everyone gets to see it, and we started bringing bread with us in our ships, like when we could be bothered to. Like if you're reshipping for a fight and you just got to get there as soon as possible, maybe not. But like in our Titans and Super Capitals and stuff, we have the in-game item bread. And I know that like Test used to have test cultures, and there are some viral agents that Horde use and stuff like that. It's great. I think that small vanity items that can be tied to like quest missions and stuff in the game, that would be great.
Oh,
Have a plate of cookies. With the devs look at the stats, they see that anytime somebody gets the deliver the plate of cookies distribution mission, people immediately fail the mission because you get to keep the cookies and they sell on the market or something. I'd love that.
that would be very, very cool. So, now to the big question. Players seem to think that the CSM are some sort of like game dev or gods, or we can force CCP to listen to us and we can go and demand fixes and changes. Have you given any thought to how you're going to balance the limitations that are placed on you as a CSM, NDA, being an advisor, with making sure that the players are being heard?
I have spoken to CCP members at FanFest and like on Discord and so on about some of the issues that I was curious about, and other CSM members as well. And some of the most common things that I get asked about, namely, can we have as many bookmark folders with ACLs as we want, shareable bookmark folders, and can we have ACL hangers so that I can have a bunch of characters in different corps and they can all share a hanger so that I don't have to contract stuff back and forth? I've spoken to CSM members and CCP about the limitations on why this cannot be just done, why they can't snap their hands and get this into the game, or they probably would have. And it's not like the CSM can't say anything about technical limitations or like kind of why this doesn't exist yet. They just can't lay out the actual future, because once they know for sure why, like if something is coming, then it's off limits for the NDA, etc. So I don't think that it's impossible to get an idea of the fixes you want and why they should or shouldn't exist in the game. I just think that they have to be broader questions, and also not like, are we getting the Angel Titan this year or are we getting Mining Titans next year kind of questions, where the players also bear a little bit of responsibility in asking for updates that make more sense,
Mm-hmm.
and not exactly like what is the next stuff that is in the next expansion, because a lot of the time that's more driven about trying to prepare in game and not asking about the things that you think would improve the game
Right.
later. But to answer the question more accurately, I think that they need to be explained a bit what you're working on their behalf. Because if they say, "I really want Mining Titans," can you ask CCP if that's coming soon? You could say, "No, but it's on my list that I've shared with them of things players have asked me for multiple times." Or explaining what you're going to be able to do forward about the situation, and not discussing the results that you're going to or not going to get.
Okay, so let's take this one step farther and make it a little bit harder. Let's take Equinox, for example. Um, some things that I have ran into as CSM at the moment is people wanting to know what happened. Why the whole thing rolled out the way it did. Unfortunately, we really can't say why, because that's, ask me again in 5 years. I'll happily tell all. But players don't understand that I can tell my side of it, but I can't tell CCP's side of it. So how do you handle that where there's such high emotions about this patch or this expansion?
At the end of the day, the CSM is not responsible for or on the hook for the changes that happen to the game. Like, we cannot actually affect it. We can only present stuff to CCP, and they have the final say on absolutely everything, regardless of if it's a horrible idea or they have a great idea that the CSM hates. I've never heard of that, but
Yeah,
let's entertain it.
You're never going to hear that. If it sees the light of day, then we didn't do our job.
And we do also at times get changes that CSM take credit for that were polarizing changes. I know, for instance, some of the current and former CSM from this year and last year have said, like, this is what I worked for, and then it's very popular amongst like a certain subset of nullsecers, right, and very unpopular amongst like small gang roamers and so on. At the end of the day, that just comes down to what people are working towards. We're not always all gonna like every change and hate every change equally.
100%. As soon as you put something out, there's going to be the players that absolutely love it, the players that absolutely hate it, and the people who couldn't care less. They just want to go back to mining.
It's always going to err a little bit more on the side of the players wanted more, that CCP did less, because they, like, the players can want an infinite amount and CCP can only do a finite amount. And
Yep.
it's always going to feel like somebody didn't get heard, or a change that should have happened didn't happen. I've spoken about how some things are good for the game and some things are good for getting people into the game. There was a discussion on the CSM part of the EVE Discord recently about the addition of Triglavian ships, where like possibly for like health and balance, it would be better to just update the ships that we have, and sometimes people just want to put new stuff into the game. Being able to tell people who haven't started playing yet, look, we're continuously adding stuff. We just added 30 ships to the game. We added a new region to the game. Here is like everything is red. We have posters with red suns and red planets and red triangles. Come join EVE. People came back to EVE for that. People would start playing EVE for that, and it sounds a little bit more sexy than Merlins now have another mid slot.
Yeah.
If that was the game, I don't think that's a good idea. Actually, that's a horrible example, but like, whatever it would take to make like a bad ship good doesn't sell butts and seats, so to speak. Eventually, we're going to have to fix everything that existed before, but there are a lot of things in EVE that come in and don't work out and just never get updated again. Nobody do them ever again. Like, it's one of those weird game play styles that people have that very few people have heard about. Like, I have a talk for our new players about some of these, and when was the last time you heard somebody like do a Cosmos mission or whatever? Like, they exist. They haven't been iterated upon since before I started playing the game.
So, just real quick, as a CSM, would you advocate for giving a Merlin a Doomsday?
No. I certainly have a lot of opinions on like underused ships and so on. Like, I do a lot of theory crafting. I'm always trying to like find out what would make me take this ship to a fight. Certainly that's one of the things that I care about a lot in the game and would love to have some say in. I really missed the fact that in Equinox we didn't get a couple of rebalanced ships in the way that some of the most recent patches have had that. And yeah, I think that would be good for the game, but sometimes trying to sell new stuff, release new stuff, Sarzak being added to the game possibly wasn't great for the game for a while. I don't think a lot of people use it as originally intended, but they got to have a big presentation about it, and that's what CCP wanted them.
Yeah, I agree. So this next issue, it's something that is kind of polarizing in my community. We have half of the people love multi-boxing. They multi-box themselves. And the other half absolutely hate multi-boxers and think that everyone should be restricted to one account. Maybe even get rid of the slot 2 or 3 characters. You only have one character ever. What is your opinion on multi-boxing?
I multi-box a lot. I guess that's the first disclaimer. I have a lot of characters. I was talking to you before the show about how I just came from hauling a bunch of stuff. I was on a dozen accounts at the same time doing that. I don't think that everyone who does it is playing fair. I think that a lot of instances you see people do like extraordinary multi-box feats, and you have to think about like, is that one player doing it, or is it not one player doing it? And to some extent, I think that as long as the current rules are upheld, multi-boxing would be good. But as somebody who likes doing pochven, there are people who fly their 15 accounts day in, day out. Suddenly, all 15 accounts disappear and 15 completely different, completely new accounts show up in the exact same space. And you kind of get an inkling that Drake Iden told CCP that somebody wasn't playing fair.
Right.
I don't think that pochven, as my favorite example for this, should be easy enough that one person can play 15 accounts, get insanely rich. I think that that is not only a failure of making the sites hard enough that like one player couldn't manage to do that, but also a bit of how the risk isn't high enough if you feel comfortable flying 15 ships that all cost 3 to 6 billion and nice pods and whatever at the same time. Like at some point there ought to be like limitations posed by the game as to why it's a bad idea or risky ideas. Like when I was multi-boxing just now, it was to have a lot of sinos on at the same time. Like it's a pain in the ass to relog over and over and over again. Like maybe that is an issue for like how sinos work and not necessarily like, do you need that many accounts? But also, people having a lot of accounts makes CCP money and it keeps the lights on in the game. So perhaps immediately banning multi-boxing, limiting everyone to only one character and nothing else, would have a way more dire consequence than allowing multi-boxing and regulating it in other ways.
So, kind of along the same line, I kind of get the feeling, especially from talking to a few candidates, that this particular group of CSM candidates really wants to get rid of drone assist. What's your feelings on that?
I don't think that drone assist is that monumental in the game. Like, I'm okay with getting rid of it for that reason. I'm not kept up at night by drone assist. I went through a gate earlier today. There were 12 Myrmidons and some insta-locking Stiletto on the gate, ganking everyone who wasn't cloaky and nullified. And I thought to myself, like, yeah, they're going to kill like 500 million ISK worth of ships over the course of that fleet. Like, It really sucks for the people who died, but it's not a huge drop in the pond. I really I don't get the argument that, for instance, it's too much work to lock incursion rats and set your drones on them. Like, sure, you'd get them there later, but I think that in most PvP scenarios and in most PvE scenarios, it is usually better to just lock stuff yourself. You got to have a rather big fleet and a rather organized fleet to bother with a drone assist rather than just eventually getting your drones there yourself. For instance, in nullsec fleets, I've not assisted drones in forever, basically.
Okay. Yeah, me personally, incursions are the only place that I use occasionally if I do gate camping. You know, it's nice to have drone assist, but yeah, I wouldn't be up all night, you know, worrying about that one either. Um, Second last question before we open it to questions from the stream. What do you think is the most pressing issue in Eve today? Out of everything that we talked about, maybe things that we didn't talk about, what do you think is like the one thing that CCP really should consider fixing?
I think it might be controversial to suggest that the most pressing issue that exists in Eve today isn't one that the CSM is going to get to decide. I honestly think that for the CSM, we get to improve the games in a game in slightly smaller ways. I think that perhaps for me, as I see the game and how I play it, normally it would be that nullsec has very large coalitions, and the coalitions themselves, whether they want to break up or not, can't find it in themselves to do so, and they're scared of doing so, and they worry that, like, if they're the first to do it, they will die. And if everyone in nullsec thought that at the same time, they would still do nothing about it. So maybe for me, the most pressing issue is like the standing system and so on, but I'm not touching upon that in my CSM campaign. I think that most of what I have on my docket is trying to make the game a little bit more fun, a little bit more balanced, a little bit better at retaining new players, stuff like that.
Okay, cool. So then, does anyone out there on the stream have any questions for Dujek? And while we're waiting for questions to come in, do you have anything else that you'd like to say or discuss that we didn't cover?
What is the most stupid thing I've done in Eve?
I like that, Harry.
I I think that maybe I can't think of any like monumentally stupid things. It's more like a constant stream of small stupid stuff. Um, a couple of days ago, I um, I died needlessly in a fleet, jumping through a gate on accident. I had no intention of going there. I was just going to go over to the gate. I jumped into a huge Naga fleet and got alphaed immediately. I can't off the top of my head think of like any monumental regrets I had in Eve. Like even accidentally jumping a Titan instead of bridging it historically in Eve has often turned into great fights. Um, I have done that once myself. I jumped into 5ZX when Frat lived there, and I was just like I was going to bridge somebody to a fort and jump there. I certainly felt that on my heart rate, but I didn't suffer for it, so it kind of also doesn't feel monumentally stupid.
Did you ever do
I
anything? Oh, go ahead.
Go on.
I was gonna say, did you ever do anything as a new player that you kind of now just facepalm about?
I've had a lot of things in game where like I didn't know the right thing to do stuff. Like I'd learn a new shortcut, or I'd realize I didn't have to do things the way I still get that. Like you play Eve long enough, you'll find out that I didn't know that was a shortcut, or I didn't know like the mechanic quite worked like it currently does. I'm having a hard time thinking of anything in particular like that, but I distinctly remember learning a new thing about Eve like 2 weeks ago that I've done for 10 years, and suddenly it's like, oh, okay, you can do it a different way.
So, someone else asks, is there anything CCP could do to make battleships play more accessible to newer players, even if they can't fly them optimally for PvP?
I honestly, I think that I see a lot of new players doing battleship stuff where they don't know how to fit it. I think that if you've ever seen somebody die in a Raven that was fit with the following, um, you'll see people with like an armor repair and a shield repair and a micro warp drive and an afterburner, and the Raven has blasters and torpedoes and heavy missiles. I think that the new player experience could go a little bit more in depth into fitting, where currently it's this is how a web works, this is how an afterburner works, this is how a point works, done. Like there's nothing past that.
Yeah. And then, are you excited for Eve Frontier, or are you normal?
There's a certainly a limit to the amount of stuff I can say about that. Here, the game absolutely doesn't need to touch on blockchain at all. Like I don't think that blockchain deserves to live anywhere. Like there are no applications. It can't be used for anything. It can be done better by any other thing. It just is absolutely just a fad that is already ended. It kind of feels like Frontier would be shut down upon launch in order to make Eve Battlefields that is an entirely AI based game. I have tried it. I am under NDA. I basically can't say much about that, but certainly if it didn't have any trace of blockchain at all, I think I might be somewhat optimistic. But as it stands, no.
Would you be willing to say that to Hilmar's face?
In the appropriate setting. I am not like there is a certain amount of how you talk to people about stuff. I think that's one of the things that I could do fine at the CSM. Like I already talk to people who work at CCP. It's nice. I don't message them while they're sleeping demanding answers. I wouldn't run up to Hilmar because he'd not be too hard to find in Iceland. Like I know what he looks like. There are not that many people in Iceland, and demand that he ceases his obsession with new technology, because I mean Eve worked out. I think that going to make an MMO was fine. I am not sure that anyone could convince Hilmar that he should never try any new project ever. He made Eve. He should retire and start gardening. Like that isn't an argument that can be made to him. If we're at the charity dinner or like we're actually speaking in an appropriate setting, I could say like blockchain is evil. It can be only used for scamming. There is no way to use that technology for good. Even environmentally, it's not sound. Like, come on.
Well, luckily,
but it has to be done tactfully.
Luckily, we are Eve CSM. We're not Frontier CSM, so we're not ever going to have to worry about that.
I also have a lot of respect for Mark Resurrectus and Ithaca Hawk and the people who are doing stuff, and they have physics PhDs, and like it's not being made by nasty people. They're all doing something. I think that, like, even though as Eve players we dislike the CCP politics of like how Eve gets made, I've not met any CCPers I can't stand. Like, they're all doing something and trying, and we're here to help them with that.
Absolutely. And this question you don't have to answer if you don't want to, but where are you from?
I'm born in Canada and I currently live in Norway. I've got a dual citizenship. And I have traveled all over for Eve. In 2005, I did some meets in Madison, Wisconsin. I did FanFest. I did Eve Vegas. I've met tons of people I played this game with, hundreds. I really like that aspect of Eve. It's fun. I went to last FanFest. I'm going to the next FanFest. We met at FanFest.
We did. And if Joe Lost really wants to talk about, those dual citizenships and accents, he'll be able to contact you at or meet you at FanFest.
Yeah, I feel like if I ever hear myself speaking played back to me, I'm like, oh god, that accent is so Norwegian-ish.
Well,
But certainly we have a very, very famous rally driver who has his own like stereotypical Norwegian accent. He is like the poster child for sounding silly while speaking English. He has some very, very quotable things. Like, this is just too good not to share, but he once won a race and they asked him, how did you do so well? And his response was, well, I started off with a very big fart and ended up like a prick in the sky, which in Norwegian is, I had great speed and then I zoomed off into the distance, and people laughed at him for years.
I love that. So one last question from Twitch chat, and then we will wrap up for the day for me, is what terrible thing would CCP have to do to make you resign as a CSM? That's actually a really good question.
What terrible thing would, like, I think that there have been things previously that were so tactless that we have had resignations, and they were not unwarranted. I don't think I'm in a position currently where anything short of being banned would make me stop playing on a short notice. I also do occasionally wonder, like, is this a thing that you can do in the game, or should I like ask if maybe this is too good to be true? I've been there before. I know people who are the wrong side of too good to be true, especially like with extracting alpha accounts for skill farms and stuff like that. You can get banned for that. There are people who do it and don't get banned. It's like, it's a luck of the draw. Recently in the Magic community, there was a huge deal that ended in like their entire kind of quote unquote CSM and analogous organization quitting. They caused like $120 million in damages. They got death threats, the whole bang. And this was a very complex issue, and not necessarily like, if the CSM pushed through multi-boxing is not allowed, only one character per account in a single CSM term overnight, or if CCP decided to do that, that's kind of the kind of thing that would create everyone resign situation. Like the game just dies overnight because it can't support itself anymore. I think there are definitely things in the game that are like sacred to me. I think that how CCP or like how the Chinese servers are doing some things are also in that category. I think some of the stuff that they do is cool, but ships that you can buy back for cash, or like they can die a certain amount of time, vouchers, or like no high sec ganking ever under any circumstances, even if it loses your money. Like, there's certainly things that they could do that would be on the other side of the I quit line.
Okay, so I have one last question for you. Out of the now 48 of us that are left on the candidates list, what other candidates would you like to serve with?
I was also asked this yesterday, and I'm going to have to start with Dutch Gunner because I forgot to mention him. I've played with him for years. He's great. He does completely different things in EVE than me, except we both are on the same tournament team. Like, every other thing we both do, no overlap whatsoever. And he's great. I also like the Oz. I watch his content. I talk to him in chat. I've spoken to him with concerns I had for the CSM, gotten responses. Like, I met him in person. I like what he has to bring to the table. I think that he is an expert in an area where I am happy to learn from him, and he's the one who could teach me and CCP about stuff. I advocated for you in my interview. I definitely think that anyone who touches on a new player experiences, especially if they have a different perspective on it, we do not do a lot of the same things in our day to day for new players. So we are both needed in that sense. And honestly, like, there are a lot of people on the current CSM roster or candidates roster who I have interacted with in game or met in person, and I respect basically, well, most of them. I can think of some examples, but I wouldn't shout them out in particular. Like, I've done fleets with some of the FCs there. I've fought some of the people who are on the other side of the table. I still speak to them all if I want to have a good time. I respect them in person as well.
Dr. Spod, we don't do that here. We're not going to talk about who we want to least serve with.
I think that there is a little bit of there's a different amount of effort that goes into it from some people. I'm thoroughly entertained by meme candidates. I just don't think that it adds that much to the CSM.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, well, thank you so much for coming and talking. An hour has already gone by. Is there any place else that if people want to continue this conversation with you that they can hit you up at?
I currently have a Reddit thread up. I will answer questions there and in DMs on Reddit. I have the official forums. I have in-game mails. I have Discord. I have the same username on everywhere, which is you'll see it if you find me on Discord or on Reddit, and it's Dujek Oneye or the underlying handle, which is basically unpronounceable, but it's at least consistent.
Excellent. Well, we will make sure that all the places that you can be found are in the description when I get this uploaded tomorrow, and I will get this into your thread on the forum as well.
I'm also doing a couple of podcasts. I'm doing, well, I did this one. I'm doing one tomorrow. I'm doing one on Saturday, Push to Talk at 5, and on Sunday, I think at 8 Eve time.
Okay. Are you going to be joining the Eve Uni roundtable on Saturday or Sunday?
Yeah, that's the
Saturday,
I think. Yeah, at 8. So I'm doing 2 on Saturday and 2 on Sunday. So that's an amount of talking. I like to talk about Eve. So
there you guys go. You can follow Dujek around space and find out different opinions, since the other interviewers will have much different topics for him. And again, thank you so much. Best of luck in the campaign, and we'll see who actually makes it.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Bye-bye.
Bye.